My name's Dave Burnison. I'm a senior DevOps advocate with GitHub, but I came to GitHub by way of Microsoft. So I've spent a lot of time working with Azure DevOps in my past professional life and everything. But we're here to talk about making Azure DevOps and GitHub greater than the sum of their parts. Dan?
So good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Hellam. I am kind of the program manager on Azure Boards. So I kind of manage everything in Boards, our GitHub integration, and our MCP server stuff, which we'll talk about here this morning as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm kind of curious, get a poll of the room. Azure DevOps customers? Nice. People that are also GitHub customers? Who has moved their repos over into GitHub? So not as many. Okay, interesting.
Perfect.
Okay, good. So you guys are going to like this session. So we're going to, from an agenda perspective, we're going to go through, kind of talk a little bit about kind of like where is Azure DevOps, where is GitHub, what that relationship looks like, and kind of how we're going to be moving forward with it. Excuse me. And then we're going to go through mostly demos. So imagine if your code and everything is in Azure DevOps and you want to use Copilot, what does that look like? And then if you do move your code over into GitHub, what does that whole thing look like, right? The integration, using Copilot, using AI, et cetera. And then at the end, assuming we have time, which I hope we do, we are going to be introducing an MCP server for Azure DevOps, which is kind of exciting. And I would like to go at least kind of step into that, show you what we can do with it. We will be announcing that to go public preview here in just a couple weeks, so that's kind of exciting. All right, so I'm sure you can imagine we get this question all the time. Where is Azure DevOps at? Where are we going with it? What is, do we need to move everything over to GitHub? Is Azure DevOps going away? So, you know, the way we start to kind of think about this is it's not about, you know, separate choices between the two. It's more about them kind of working together. And so the way we're investing in both products, without a doubt. But we're also investing in the integration between them two so they become part of this more of a connected ecosystem. And so what that means is that enables customers like yourself to take your repos from Azure DevOps, move them into GitHub, use all the great things that you're seeing, you know, at the event here today about what GitHub can do, and then also get that full traceability back to Azure DevOps for things like your code and your work items and pipelines. And so that's kind of how we're seeing the relationship moving forward, right? It's investing in both products, absolutely, but really investing in the integration. So as GitHub comes out with new, cool, innovative stuff, our job is to try to go ahead and make sure that we kind of integrate with that, especially for those customers that are staying in things like Azure Boards and Azure Pipelines. If we kind of, did it switch? Yes. If we take a look at kind of what we've been seeing over the last 6 to 12 months, so we've been, you know, the GitHub Azure Boards integration has literally been around since like 2018. It's been around for quite some time. But we didn't do a whole lot over the last 5, 6, 7 years, up until about 2 years ago. And so at that time, we had some of these biggest customers that you're seeing here on the screen starting to come to us and say, hey, we want to move our repos over, but we can't because the traceability story is so bad. And so we just started investing pretty heavily. And so over the last 6 to 12 months or so, we've really seen an uptick of customers moving their repos over into GitHub. You know, obviously people will start slow, right? Move a few repos at once, then we start moving more, and eventually get to the point where some of these customers here have moved all their repos over into GitHub, are using the integration, and it's not just hundreds of repos, it's up into thousands of repos. We actually had a conversation with some folks on the floor yesterday with a customer. They have 10,000 plus repos moved over into GitHub and doing that integration, which is insane. And not only does like the integration just work, for, you know, in general, it also works at scale. So it allows customers of that size to kind of move stuff over. So we'll jump into the demos. Before Dave starts, I wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit. So the way we see it is there's basically kind of people fall into 2 buckets. The first bucket is you're all in Azure DevOps, but you want to start taking advantage of Copilot. What does that look like, right? And that's kind of the first thing Dave's going to walk through. And then the second thing we're going to walk through is, okay, now I move my stuff over into GitHub, my code over into GitHub. What does that look like? What's that experience look like? What does that integration look like? And so Dave, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off.
All right. Well, just a little bit of a graphic here. You know, we fully understand that you want to continue and leverage those investments you've made in Azure Boards, Azure Pipelines. You've probably created custom work item types, added fields, leveraging the dashboards, lots of reporting and things like that, leveraging templates and Azure pipelines and all of that. But you can take advantage of GitHub Copilot today, even while the code is still in Azure DevOps. And you can do that in your IDE of choice, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, JetBrains. Now we've got Xcode and Eclipse in there as well. And that allows you to take advantage of even some of the latest innovations with Copilot, like Copilot Vision and Copilot Agent Mode and more. Now, if you notice here, the Copilot icon's not quite as big as the other icons, and that's to represent what you have in this scenario is a subset of the overall Copilot capabilities. You can also take advantage of GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. So dependency scanning, code scanning, secret scanning, and secret push protection, and things like that. But again, it's a subset of the capabilities that are available to you. All right, so switch over here. Now, the first part of the demo is actually a video because there's a little bit that I wanted to speed up here. But let's get this rolling here. So, yeah, you've made all these investments in Azure DevOps. You're taking advantage of things like these analytics charts and everything so you can get the data that you want. Now, I'm going to take a look at my website here. This is Parts Unlimited. But, you know, auto parts site. But we're not Fabricam. We're Contoso. We acquired Parts Unlimited from Contoso. So we need to go through and update all the branding and everything. But this code base is new to us since we acquired it. But you can see I've still got the code here in Azure repos. And one thing I want to highlight here, there's a .github folder where I've got a Copilot instructions.md file. And we'll see how that comes into play here in a little bit. So now if I go into Visual Studio Code, you know, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to work with the GPT-4.1 model. I'm going to switch from edit mode to ask mode. And I'm going to say, what does the code in this workspace do? What is the tech stack? So let that run for a moment. Copilot's going to come back, give us a real nice summary of what's going on. And there's a couple of things I want to highlight here. We can see it automatically pulled in that Copilot instructions file as context. And you know, it recognizes that we're using Azure pipelines for CI/CD. And when it comes to testing, you know, we're using Selenium and Playwright, but we've got a comment in there that says we favor Playwright for new testing now. And if we look at this Copilot instructions file, we'll see we're referencing these things right there, kind of giving Copilot a summary of what our tech stack is. And there's that comment about favoring Playwright over Selenium and such. So you can see that's why that ended up in those comments and everything. So now I'm going to come back over here and open up one of my user stories. So I'll go over to my board. And we've got a user story here that says we want to update the subsidiary ref to Contoso. But our product manager went in there and actually put a screenshot in here and said, hey, we need to change Fabricam to Contoso everywhere. So I'm going to copy that image, go back over to Visual Studio Code, and now I'm going to switch modes here. So I'm going to go from ask into agent mode. So you have agent mode in Visual Studio Code now. And I'm going to select Claude 3.7 Sonnet as the model that I want to work with. And I'm going to paste that screenshot in here because Copilot can pull context from that screenshot. So we can see, you know, here's the comments about changing from Fabricam to Contoso. And then I'm going to, in this case, not a very sophisticated prompt, really. I'm just going to say, we're Contoso. We purchased Parts Unlimited from Fabricam. Where do I need to change the code to address the branding noted in the screenshot? And also be sure to update any tests. So this is where we need to speed things up a little bit as Copilot goes off and does its work. But yeah, you can see it's already pulling in a couple of references, found 4 results throughout the code. So now it's digging into specific files like our layout file and such. It found the tests. It found our infrastructure as code file because we tag all of our resources out in Azure with the business unit name and such. And then it's giving me a really nice little summary of what it's going to do. So change that layout file, update our tests, update our infrastructure as code script, and a couple of other changes. So now we'll let it go off and do all of those changes. And you can see first it starts out in that layout file making changes. And then in the background, if you watch up here at the top there, it's opening up and updating the test file. Next, it's going to update that infrastructure as code script that's out there. There we go. So yeah, you can see, and it's giving us all of this logging information as it goes to show us exactly what it's doing. So we can see step by step what Copilot is doing. And then also, even now it's popped up the buttons, keep or undo. As the developer, we stay in control. Copilot's doing this work, but we make the final decisions. We review the code changes. You know, we may want to go in there and say, oh, that's not quite right. You need to tweak that a little bit. Now it's showing us the changes that it actually made, and thankfully that looks very similar to what it said it was going to do in the beginning. Now, one other thing I want to highlight here is when I go to actually commit the changes, and for now I'm just going to commit the front-end changes, so the layout file and the test, but when I go in, there we go, you'll notice that little sparkle icon there next to the blank commit message. I hit that sparkle icon, and Copilot's going to generate the commit message for me. And I don't know about you, but for things like this, Copilot's probably going to provide a better description than I would take the time to type myself, kind of a thing. So that becomes very helpful, not only for me, but let's say if Dan's going to be reviewing the code, he's going to have more detail there and more context when he goes to look at the commits and review the code and things like that. There we go. Now we can see update name from Fabricam to Contoso and also update the tests and layouts. This is just pretty simple example here. All right. So now the next scenario we'll look at is Azure DevOps with the code in GitHub and GitHub Copilot. So just a little kind of intro to that. You know, by moving the code to GitHub, we're going to maximize developer productivity and keep your code and dependencies secure. So you should move your code to GitHub to take advantage of all of these capabilities, but still be able to leverage those investments in boards and pipelines and maintain that traceability and all of that. But what more can you take advantage of in GitHub? Well, notice both the Copilot and GitHub Advanced Security icons grow there. So those additional AI capabilities on GitHub.com include having Copilot chat right on GitHub.com. So I can begin to ask questions about the code in my repo and everything even before I open up an IDE. Or I can have Copilot generate meaningful pull request descriptions. You know, again, as a developer, I'm probably just going to throw the basic words, yeah, that addresses user story 1, 2, 3 or whatever. But Copilot will generate very descriptive pull request descriptions and such. And then another key thing is being able to assign an initial code review to Copilot. So yeah, let's say I go ahead and create a pull request. I ask Dan to be the reviewer, but Copilot's going to go through that probably before Dan even gets a chance to be notified that there's a pull request waiting for his review, kind of a thing. So then Dan can focus on, you know, the more substantial pieces after seeing Copilot pick up if I've got any syntax errors or minor errors or things like that. And then we're also talking about the additional GitHub Advanced Security capabilities like Copilot Autofix. We've added a really nice graphical security overview so you can see the trends over time. How many vulnerabilities are being introduced? How many are we fixing? We've also launched security campaigns, and I'll show that here a little later as well. And then one last thing here to mention is GitHub Codespaces. GitHub Codespaces, if you're not familiar with that, is Visual Studio Code running inside the browser. So now as a developer, I don't need to go find, the wiki page in Azure DevOps or some SharePoint page that says, well, if you're working on our project, here's all the extensions you have to load, here's the connection strings for the debug environment, things like that. That all gets codified right in a file that lives in your repo. So I can go and spin up a code space literally in a minute or two. And if I'm working on a couple of different projects, I'll have different configurations for different code spaces so that I can easily jump back and forth between those projects and not have to worry about things conflicting in my own personal demo environment and such. Now, one other thing we want to talk about is Azure DevOps is deployed in 9 Azure geographies. And until recently, Azure DevOps customers who relied on that data residency outside of the United States didn't really have a great option in GitHub. But GitHub now has enterprise cloud with data residency deployments in Europe, Australia, and as of earlier this month, the United States. And there's even more on the way. And with the improved enterprise-grade features and more control over where the code is stored, GitHub Enterprise Cloud will help more enterprise customers meet their security and compliance needs with data residency that addresses things like the ability to store your code and repository data in the preferred region, and enhanced user control, allowing organizations to manage and control user accounts, unique namespaces specific to your company on GHE.com, isolated from the open source cloud, and enhanced availability and support for zone-based business continuity and disaster recovery. A lot of details there, but I'm sure that probably resonated with some of you, definitely. Now, originally migrating code from Azure repos to GitHub in the cloud meant your code had to live in github.com. But now we have options for those who need more control over data residency. Dan, can you show us the new integration options that are going to allow you to take advantage of GitHub's data residency?
Yes, sir. What am I, number 3, right?
Yep. There you go.
Okay. So, we talked about Azure DevOps and the integration and trying to keep it more connected. So it's only a matter of time when customers start moving over to GitHub Enterprise with data residency that we're going to want to have a connection back to Azure DevOps for the integration. Unfortunately, the original architecture that we had with it did not work very well. It worked with GitHub.com, but now we've actually done a bunch of work to allow you to have GitHub Enterprise with data residency also included. So if you've moved to the cloud with data residency in GitHub, you can now actually integrate back with Azure DevOps. This is currently in preview right now. We're still actually working out some details and getting this thing deployed out generally, but it is available. Now, there's not a whole lot exciting here, to be honest with you. Once you create your namespace, you basically plug it in, and then it validates it, and then you're basically off just adding the repos like you normally would. But it is supported. So if there's folks out here that are going to be moving over to GitHub Enterprise with data residency, please reach out to me. I'm going to be on the floor later today or come out afterwards. You want to get included into the preview, let me know. We can definitely get you hooked up. Now, before I get into the other integration stuff, I want to just explain a couple things, too. Some of the improvements that we made. So when we originally put together the integration, like I said, it's been out since like 2018. And we had no idea that people were going to want to add 10,000 repos to their Azure DevOps project, which is insane. So we had a lot of caps on it at the time. So we originally you could only have like 250. We then raised it to 500. Now we're at 1,500. So we did a bunch of engineering work to make sure that that scaled properly. So now you can have 1,500 repos connected to Azure DevOps. And I think in probably the next couple of months, that'll get increased up to about 2,000. And we'll probably sit at that 2,000 for quite some time to see how it goes. Another thing that we would run into here is, and again, if you've been doing this before, if you had a couple hundred repos that you wanted to connect to, this whole page would just bomb out, right? You couldn't get to it. It would basically completely fail. And so again, we did a bunch of re-engineering work to make that better. So now again, that customer that I was talking about that had 10,000, they're able to get in here, find their repos, connect to them without having that issue anymore. So again, it's just mentioning it because I think it's important that people just understand that it does scale out pretty well for large organizations. All right, so let's go into the details of the actual integration. So there's a couple different ways you can do this, right? I can come in and I can work on a pull request and a commit and link back to existing work items, or I can do the reverse. I can be sitting on an existing work item and link that back to an existing pull request or commit in Azure in GitHub. So I'm going to kind of walk through the way that I think we would recommend doing it. It's also kind of the neatest way of doing it because it does a bunch of automatic stuff for you. So I'll go ahead and start this up. So the way I recommend doing it is, again, is you can come in here, open up a work item, and create a new branch. And so here we'll put in a branch name. We'll put in Dave Branch 1. I'll then select my repository. In this case, I only have one repo, but again, if you had several hundred, several thousand, you could go ahead and search and find it. It'll remember the last one that you did, so you don't have to go search and find it every single time. You go ahead and we're going to go off the main branch, and obviously it obviously creates a link directly right to the work item when I create it. So I'm going to go ahead and create that branch. You can see the branch then pops up over on the right side. Great. And now I'm going to go make a code change. So I'm going to go into that branch. Let's see. I'm going to come into my Hello World 2, and we're going to go ahead and make an edit. We'll just do Hello World. Actually, can you guys see that okay? Do I need to increase it? Is that better? Good? Okay. Okay, so I'm just making a simple code change, right? Nothing overly complex. I'm going to go ahead and do the commit. So in this case, I'm just going to commit directly into the branch. We're just going to be commit message. There's nothing here. You'll notice I'm not doing anything fancy with AB pound, so I'm avoiding doing that on purpose for a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and create this branch. Create this commit. And the commit is done. I come into my pull request. I'm going to create my pull request. So here, I can, again, when we talk about things that are cool inside of GitHub, I can go ahead and use Copilot Actions to go ahead and create a summary of the changes. Obviously, not a very complex change here, so it should be very straightforward. I'm going to go ahead now and create a PR. And again, I haven't done anything with this AB pound stuff that we used to have to do before. If I come back over to my work item, you should see the pull request automatically get linked. And this is because this is because once we create a link to the branch, we will then automatically link any follow-up pull request to that, and then so you don't have to do the AB pound. Now, the AB pound is still necessary here in some cases. So if I want to automatically close my work item, or if I want to automatically set it to a custom state, so like resolved, I'm going to have to put in there a resolved AB pound, whatever it is that the work item ID is. Now, we always had fixes and fixed. I think we also supported fixes and fixed, where it automatically would close it out. But now, if you have a custom state called foo, you can go ahead and do that, and it'll go ahead and do the custom state transitions for you. So we're in 51 here. I'm just going to do, just so you can see it, just do an AB pound 51. And we're going to go ahead and update that comment. Oh, yeah, I guess I better do the.
Yeah, so this gives you fine-grained control over what state do you want the act of merging that pull request to put the work item into.
So you see it went from just text over to a link. All right, so now it's linking that up. Again, I didn't have to do this if I don't care about custom state transitions. The other thing we did too is just in work with GitHub on their basically development control. It shows up over on the right side as well. So again, if you've got just like a really busy pull request going on and you don't have to necessarily go see which one's linked, it just shows up over on the right side. Let's see here. So I'm going to go ahead and, the other thing to note here is that you can see that Copilot will come in here, take a look at your pull request, and make suggestions on it. And so in this case here, I just have an extra comma, which I didn't want to do before, or doesn't make sense in a JSON file. So I can go ahead and take a look at this. Oh, yeah, looks like I made a mistake. Let's go ahead and commit that suggestion and go ahead and complete that.
That was Copilot. That wasn't me doing that code review. That was Copilot doing that code review, right?
That's right.
That's awesome.
So Copilot will go ahead and do the fix for you. You can go ahead and review it. You can do whatever you want, right? I can commit it. I can ignore it, whatever you want to do. So now if we come back here, you can see I have obviously the branch. I have the pull request in there. We don't automatically do the commits. And the reason we don't automatically do the commits is it can get pretty darn noisy. A lot of people do a lot of different commits before they complete the pull request. But we will do the merge commit after the pull request is completed, right? So you should have a nice history there of all that. So what I'm going to go do here is I'm going to go ahead and complete this. Oh, I can't do this, right, because we're running through all the checks. One thing I wanted to of note is on the pull request itself, you're starting to see a lot more information shine up on the work item, whether it's waiting for checks in this case, whether it's completed, whether it's waiting for review. So it's just a lot more information that you can kind of now see. Before, it used to just say whether it's open or closed. That no longer happens. So if I come back here to, I'm just going to open up a different work item that actually already has the pull request has been checks have been completed. So in this case here, again, I did an AB pound to 570. I'm going to go ahead and complete the pull request real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and merge, confirm the merge. Again, come back to the work item. Now it went automatically. You can see automatically it's going to close, obviously, the pull request, and then you're also going to see the merge commit. So that automatically just gets automatically linked. So again, if I don't want to do all that AB pound stuff, it just does it for me. And then the last thing that we've done here is once I go ahead and delete the branch, before you have to go back to the work item and delete the branch manually, this will just automatically get removed. So I'll go ahead and delete branch, come back to the work item. Looks like I might have to refresh. Did I go to the right one? Uh-oh. Dan has a bug. It should remove that branch. Interesting. So that it should remove that bug or remove that branch. So yeah. So what else was I going to go through? I think those are the two. Oh, the last thing I would mention too is that we've done is let's go back to here. Oh, you can also see it's changed it to resolved, so it automatically set it to resolve, so it can move the state transition happens. And then the last thing I just wanted to show, let's see, part 3 real quick, is builds. So before, again, if you had a YAML pipeline in Azure DevOps running against a GitHub repo and you do a build, we weren't able to basically link that build like you would if your code was in GitHub repos. And so now that actually works as well. And so if your code is over in GitHub, you run that pipeline, it'll go ahead and link all that up as long as it's linked up properly with a branch and the pull request and the commits. A couple things that are missing in the integration that you'll notice that we're still working on. One of them is if I do a release pipeline, right, and it's a YAML pipeline, guess what? Right now you don't see the stages like you do, or I guess it was the release, so dev, QA, production, whatever. You don't see those showing up on the work item yet. That's work that we need to go do. First, we want to go ahead and complete that work for if your code is in Azure DevOps. That's still not there yet, right? So we want to go get that for YAML pipelines, and then we'll do it if your code is in GitHub. So those are kind of the two last main things that we're going to do from the integration perspective. I think that's it. It's over back to you,
Okay.
right, Dave? Yeah.
No, and from my perspective, watching all these changes and everything, like Dan said, there's been a level of integration there for a number of years, but really in what, the last, yeah, go ahead, that's fine. In the last 6 to 9 months is when a lot of these updates have come to make it a lot more seamless with the integration. And
Yeah, it's in the last 12 to 18 months.
okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we've done a lot of work on it.
All right, so now let's talk about, so we were looking at the code living in Azure repos. Now I've got the scenario, same team project. Whoops, I should have been on my dashboard. Let me go back there. So now the code is living in GitHub repos, still leveraging, Azure boards and Azure pipelines and all of that. Let me skip ahead to my notes here. There we go. And if I go over to my Kanban board, this product backlog item is over here now, and we can see that we've got a couple of GitHub pull requests linked automatically to this, GitHub commits, GitHub branches, and all of that. And all of that started out because I created that branch right here from, don't mean to bounce around too much, but created the new GitHub branch right from the work item itself, right? So on we can see we went ahead and merged the pull request where we did the front end changes. Now we've got a separate pull request really for demo purposes here for the back end changes, for those infrastructure as code changes and such. So if I notice how I jumped right to that pull request, so that seamless integration. I've asked Dan to do a review here, but you can also ask Copilot to do a code review for you here. And then again, Dan kind of showed this, but I've got a little more meat in the summary that comes from Copilot here. So we'll give that a second. This is live, so hopefully come back pretty quickly. There we go. Yep, came back pretty quickly. That's a lot more comprehensive. So now when Dan comes in to review the code, he can really get a sense for what this pull request does, or we now have GitHub Copilot right here in github.com. So I can say, let's go into assistive mode, and it even gives us some suggestions here. I could go ahead and type something in, but I'm just going to use this suggestion here, explain this pull request. And it kind of says, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Now it's thinking and analyzing and everything, but it's going to give that detailed summary of what's in this pull request. There we go. High-level overview of the pull request, impact, potential risks, overview of the conversation, gives us where the approval status is right now. The final state of the reviews was commented, indicating further action or explicit approval may still be required and everything. And there was actually, when I was rehearsing this the other day, Copilot results may vary from time to time, but what it came in, and it even said, hey, we see you're using modern practices, linking code changes directly to Azure boards, work items, fosters traceability and accountability, a key DevOps principle. So at times, it's even kind of helping you reinforce good DevOps and things like that. All right, let me check my notes here. So if I close that out there, scroll down here we can see, here's the code review that was done by Copilot. Now in this case, it didn't find anything to change, but it kind of explains its perspective of what changes were made, kind of a thing. Now we scroll down a little further, even before Dan was able to do his review, we can see that code scanning came into effect here and alerted us about this security vulnerability here. Now, before I go into the details on this here, I want to go back over to my project in Azure DevOps, and if I look under the repos, you can see we have advanced security here. So we do have advanced security for Azure DevOps, and it gives you the code scanning, the dependency scanning. We can see we have a number of items here related to Bootstrap, and if we dive into one of these, it says, hey, what you really want to do here is you want to upgrade that version of Bootstrap and all of that. It's like, okay, that's fine, but it's leaving me to do that work, kind of a thing. If I, whoops, there we go. I can see my code scanning results and everything. And if I look for, there we go, there's that missing cross-site request forgery token validation. That's that same alert that's popping up right inside the pull request in GitHub. And yeah, it gives you the exact line and everything, gives you a nice description. It even kind of, but when it comes to the fix, it's giving me kind of a generic version. Well, this is probably what your code looks like. The suggested fix, yeah, you want to add this validate anti-forgery token, but hey, developer, it's up to you to make that change. And the other thing about the GitHub Advanced Security and Azure DevOps here, this is really it. We have these different list views of things. We don't have a nice overview and things. So now if I go back over to GitHub, we see the alert was raised right inside the pull request. So this is a key thing here. We're keeping developers in the flow. And we talk about now found means fixed. And what do we mean by that? Well, if you look just below that alert, here's Copilot Autofix coming into play. And let's see if I can zoom in here without it getting too, there we go. So yeah, Copilot Autofix is actually suggesting the exact fix, and it's saying, yeah, I'm going to go into line 188, and I'm going to add that validate anti-forgery token line for you, kind of a thing. And if we scroll down here, we can see I could go ahead and commit that right away. Or if I felt, well, I'm not quite sure about that, maybe I want to go edit that and run some additional tests and things like that. So Copilot's helping you with this work, but leaving you in control. And the nice thing about, doing this inside the pull request, we're going to find and fix vulnerabilities before they hit the main branch, even before your code hits the main branch for the first time, kind of a thing. Now, so here's Dan's review and everything. Says, hey, that looks great. Let's go ahead and ship it. That's those review or the code changes in the infrastructure as code scripts and templates and things. Now, if I look at the checks, this is where we've plugged in Azure pipelines, right? And if I go into the details here, I can see key information, that I would see in Azure pipelines. There's my test results and everything. But if I want to see that nice graphical view of my test results, and maybe I want to drill into some more details, seamless integration right there. So I can take a look at all of the tests, and if there were any failed tests, I could easily dive into those tests and things. Another thing to point out here, so now quickly jump back to GitHub, seamless integration, jump into the summary of the pipeline, and it's showing us here, there's a link back to the GitHub repo. There's the link directly to that pull request. If I look over to the side here, here's the reference to the different work items. So we're keeping all of that traceability even though we're working inside of both systems. All right, so jump right back to that pull request. All right, I think that's let me make sure, I think that's everything I wanted to show on the pull request. Now, a couple of other things about Copilot. Like I said, we have Copilot chat right here. We talked about the custom instructions, right? That's something you put inside of your repository. So you have, you can put your coding style and specific things about your repo, but now by having the code on github.com, I can go up to the organization level, go into my settings, and now if I come down and look at the Copilot settings here, I've got custom instructions here where I can drill in and say, here's our general coding standards for our organization. And that will apply, that'll get sucked in as context whenever you're asking Copilot to work inside of any one of the repos in that organization and things. And we even give you some little helpers here, so you can say, hey, how do you want to respond? Do you want lengthy narratives, or do you just want bullet points and things like that? Another thing you can do with Copilot here, if I go into my immersive mode, I've got personal instructions. So I can have organization level instructions. I can have personal instructions. So maybe that's where you would want developers to put how they want the responses. Do you want longer narratives? I'm new to this project. I need to better understand this new technology. This old guy, did all of his work back in the C++ days. I need to better understand these newer technologies, so give me lengthier explanations and things like that. Now, since let me go. There we go. Let me get back to my organization. So another thing I want to point out at the organization level here is security. So here we have this nice graphical overview of how many new vulnerabilities are being introduced, how many are being fixed. Now, this just being a demo environment, those lines are pretty flat because I keep things, pretty much the same so I can do these demos over and over. Hopefully the number of vulnerabilities being found would be less than the ones that are getting fixed, right? Hopefully you're burning down that security debt. But, we can see repo by repo, open alerts, critical, high, what are SAST vulnerabilities and things like that. But a couple other things I want to point out here. We've recently introduced security campaigns. What's a security campaign? Well, this is where I see the security team and the developers kind of coming together. The security team comes in and looks at all of those alerts and says, hey, we really need to focus in on cross-site scripting for the next 30 days. So we're going to create a security campaign for that. Or we want to focus in on the MITRE top 10, and knock those off the next couple of weeks. I've created one here specifically for Parts Unlimited to say we want to address the or critical and high vulnerabilities that have been found in Parts Unlimited. And we can see here we've got 31 vulnerabilities, but take a look over here. Copilot says that it can address 29 of those vulnerabilities with Copilot AutoFix. So if I dive in, and I can filter, thank you. I can filter and say, okay, which ones can Copilot AutoFix address? And, so I can go through and look at all of these. And I've got one here in particular. It's got a little more complex of a change. We're starting to introduce some Python code into this solution. So we've got, Python set up. And since we were new to Python, we didn't realize, we need to be better about how we're handling the cryptographic algorithm kind of a thing here. But Copilot's going to help me with that change. I'm going to go. If I look at the pull requests here, we've got a number of pull requests that have actually been opened by Dependabot. So we were looking at those vulnerabilities with Bootstrap. Now we can see Dependabot has opened a pull request to help us address all those vulnerabilities related to Bootstrap. So, and it's just, in this case, it's a simple file change. It's just really updating what version of Bootstrap we're using. But since it's running through all of our checks, all of our builds, all of our tests, if you're using linting or other quality check tools, we can be assured that this simple change is not breaking something else. And then as the developer, I could go ahead and say, yeah, I approve that. Let's go ahead and merge that pull request. So again, making it very easy to keep your supply chain secure. Yep. All right. Actually, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully, we've seen enough things to talk about reasons for bringing your code into GitHub. So let's switch over. Oh, let me get back to.
I think you're good.
Get past. So when we talk about bringing your code into GitHub, we've got tools to help you with this. The GitHub Enterprise Importer. GHEI, that'll migrate repos to GitHub, including all the pull request history, map your users over. It'll even keep the links to the work items in those pull requests. And GHEI has been proven to work for many enterprises already, so you can feel confident in accelerating your migration by using this tool. I see people holding up cameras and everything. All of these links are in this deck. The deck will be downloadable afterwards. So we've got these links and even more in there.
Let's go back. One more thing on this, too. It's my understanding, I haven't actually played with this too much, but it's my understanding that is when you do the migration of repos, it'll actually set up the connection of those new repos back to the Azure DevOps project, so you don't have to go ahead and do all that yourself. It kind of just does it all for you.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. Okay, cool. So MCP server. So everybody know what MCP server is? Yes? Some people who don't? Okay. Let me give just a quick explanation of what it is. So MCP server is essentially this kind of layer. If we talk about it in context of Azure DevOps and Copilot, it's kind of this little server layer that sits between Copilot and your data in Azure DevOps, right? And so when I switch over to agent mode in Visual Studio Code, I can then ask it questions, and as long as there's a tool available in MCP server, it'll then find that and then execute whatever is in that tool. So a good example would be if I want to go and get a list of projects for my Azure DevOps, right? I can say, get me a list of projects in Copilot. It'll look for that tool. If that tool exists, that tool then is going out, calling the REST APIs, pulling the data back, and showing you the results. So I think I'm just going to jump into a demo of this real quick, just because I think it's going to be more interesting for people. That's me there, right?
Yep.
So
yep, you're good.
I am going to do, actually, I think we have time for 3. So I'm going to show all 3 of these. And so this is all going to be in video right now, just because sometimes the processing time takes a few minutes, and so the demo can either be like a minute long or it can be 6 minutes long, depending on how the model's behaving that day. So I'm sure if you're all, I think most of you raise your hands. If you're into Azure DevOps, what a major pain in the neck in Azure DevOps is when you add new iterations and then have to go assign those to teams, right? So like at the first of the year, guess what I get to go do? I have to go out and do the whole year's worth of iterations, and then I got to go assign all those teams. Well, wouldn't it be great if I could just have Copilot do that work for me? And so I'm going to kind of step through this. So the first thing I'm going to go do is I'm going to go say, give me a list of iterations for a particular project. So it's going to go out there and find the iterations that I already have. I'm going to pull those in. Give me a list of them. So it kind of just spits them out for you. The next thing I'm going to ask it to go do is I want you to just create all new iterations for the rest of 2025 using that same pattern, right? And then I'm going to go assign that to my team. And so it's going to go out and generate all the new iterations. Again, there's a tool out there that generates generates each iteration. Here I'm passing all the different iteration names and the dates. It knows, the model already kind of understands it and knows. And then I'm going to go create iterations. And now, let me pause this real quick. One thing that's interesting, obviously, with kind of how MCP server works and just models in general, I kind of compare it to like your kids, right? Like you come home from the groceries and put groceries away. Sometimes they do what they're told. They put the groceries away. Sometimes they go off and run into the street, right? And so depending on what it's doing, right, it takes your suggestion and tries to assume you're kind of the next one. And so that's what this one did here, right? I created my iterations, and then it's like, well, look, you got to assign them to a team, so let's go ahead and assign it to the team as well. And so I didn't even have to ask it. And so now you can kind of see here, that it went out, generated those iterations for me, assigning those to my team for me. And so instead of for me spending 20, 30, 40 minutes going out and do that manually through the UX, which kind of blows, it does it all for me right here through the MCP server. Let me show another fun example here, too, that I think it'll resonate with folks. So the concept on this one here, again, is I'm sitting in Visual Studio Code. I'm doing my work. I don't want to have to necessarily go out to the UX and find my work items and do all that kind of stuff. It'd be great if I could just do it from Copilot while I'm in VS Code instead of bouncing around. And so here I'm going to go basically do that. So the first thing I need to go do is I got to get a list of projects because I need to know what project I'm working in because the model needs that context before I can go get my work items. So here it's going to go ahead and say, get you a list of projects. It'll go ahead and fetch them, calls the right tool, brings the stuff back, spits out the list of projects for me, and then I'm going to go say, okay, well, I need all my work items for me. And so I'm going to go call and say, hey, give me a list of my work items. for the project that I care about. In this case, it's our Parts Unlimited GH project. Now, this project only has like 6 items assigned to me. It's pretty small, obviously, so it only takes a second, but it doesn't really matter. And so it's going to go out and get my work items. Now, one thing that is interesting with our APIs in Azure DevOps, especially for work items, is we just return IDs for everything. We don't actually give you the details yet. So here it's actually smart enough to know, say, look, I just sent you a bunch of IDs. It's not really going to help you much. Let's go get all the details in batch as well. And so now it's going off. You can see there's like 4 IDs there. It's returning all the actual work items for me with all the details and spitting them out for me on screen. Gives me a little summary of stuff, even though I didn't ask for it. It does all that. So now I can actually open up an individual work item that I care about. So in this case, I might want to open up work item 51. Again, does the same thing, goes out and gets it. And again, this is going to be kind of like my kids. It'll go out and get it, but now it's like, oh, it looks like you might need the comments too, even though I didn't ask for it. And so now it's going to go out, grab the work item, grab the details, and also grab the comments for me, and then spit out those comments. And so you can do some pretty creative stuff here, right? I can say, instead of looking at all the comments, I can say, go load the comments, give me a summary of all that stuff. I don't want to see them all individually. It's kind of up to you. So here it's giving me this full rundown of my work item. You can see that the priority is 3. What else did I change? The state was actually approved at that time. And now what I want to go do is I actually want to go update this work item. So again, I don't want to necessarily go back to Azure DevOps and the UX. I should be able to update the work item right here from Copilot. So I can say update the priority to 1. I'm going to go ahead and set the state to, what do I set it here? To committed. And I'm actually going to spell committed wrong on purpose because I want the model to fix that for me. And so I'm going to go ahead and say update priority, update state. And in this case, I'm asking it to use batch, so it does not one update at a time. It'll actually do all the updates, roll them into a batch process. I'm going to pause here, too, when it pops up. Come on. OK. So you also notice some interesting stuff here, too. So the way we do things in boards and on work items is we have a ref name, which is at Microsoft.vsts.common.priority. And we also have system.state. But because I loaded the work item previously, it just knows that I'm looking for that field based on whatever I called it. So it kind of just does all the work for me, which is pretty sick. And so now when I send it to this tool, it's looking for the ID. So I want to update 51. I'm going to update the path, and I'm going to update the value. Did I hit play? Yep, hit play. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. It goes ahead and does the update, completes the update. You can see then the output is just basically the return result. And then I go out and get the work item to show you that I actually did it. And now in this case, again, I didn't ask it to go get the work item, but it's again like my kids going out and doing it again for me. Gives me the results, and then it actually gives me a comparison. Here's what you did before, here's what it is now, just to prove to you that I did the update. So I think that's pretty interesting. So this MCP server is going to be available, I think, in about the next 2 weeks. We tried to get it out before build, we just didn't get it all done in time. I have one more demo. So is this like exciting to folks? Like, is this cool or not cool? All right. All right. So I'm going to show you the one that I think is like wicked cool. And again, use your imagination on some of this stuff too, because you can get very imaginative on what you can do. So in this case, I actually have a backlog of features. And some Yahoo put in a bunch of features in there. They just put in the titles. They didn't put any descriptions in them. They didn't tag anything either. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. So I'm going to actually load up my entire backlog. I'm going to go through the entire thing. I'm going to generate descriptions for every single one of them, and I'm going to tag all of them. And so that's what we're going to do here in this case. So you can see here I have, again, my full backlog. It's all these features. They're all generated, but nobody really put in any real data into it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, again, I need to get context in this case. So I'm going to get my projects first, so I know what project I'm working in. So I'll go ahead and do that. The next thing I'm going to go do is, in order to get the backlog information, I need to know the team name. And so in this case, I'm going to say, give me the list of teams for this particular project. So I'm going to go ahead and lay those teams up. The next thing I'm going to go do is like, okay, now that I have my teams, now that I have my project, the API is going to require what kind of backlog level do you care about in this case. So I'm going to say, go ahead and load my backlog level for this particular team as well. So it's going to go ahead and say, all right, grab the backlog levels. And at that point, then I can go ahead and get the work items for that entire backlog. So here's going to say list backlogs. You should see 4 or 5 backlogs here, levels, epic, features, stories, tasks. And then I'm going to say, okay, great. Now give me all the work items for this particular backlog level. So it's going to go show me all the work items. In this case, I only care about like ID, title, and tags. I don't care about all the other stuff. It's going to go ahead and grab all those. You can see here I have, again, the project, the team, and the backlog level. How are we doing on time? Doing okay?
5 minutes.
Okay.
Yep, doing good.
So, and again, it just returns IDs. So it's smart enough to know, like, okay, great. I just sent you a bunch of IDs. Now I need to go ahead and load up all the actual details of those. Right? And then it goes and spits them out. Now, this backlog, again, is only like 18 of them, but it kind of gives you the idea. You can see there's no tags on anything. Here's all the items that I care about. So now what I want to go do is like, all right, cool. Go through all those features, update all the descriptions for me. And so I can kind of pause here if you guys want to read it, but essentially it's going through, it says, hey, go through each feature, generate the description. The description should be clear and detailed and all that kind of stuff. Make sure I understand it. I want the format to be HTML. The reason I'm doing that actually is because we actually now have Markdown fields in Azure DevOps that we're kind of in preview right now. And I don't want to spit out a bunch of Markdown for this. And I don't show the preview. So sometimes it'll go through this, again, like your kids. It'll go through each one and show you a preview before it actually does the save. And so I said, I don't want to see a preview of any of this stuff. I just want you to generate it and go save it. And I want, in this case, again, I want to use batch. Because then it does a bunch of updates at once rather than trying to do one at a time where I have to confirm. So we'll go ahead and through that. Did I hit it? I think I did, didn't I? Yeah, it's going. All right. And then now this case too, where I'm actually using another MCP server called Sequential Thinking. And what that does is it basically works with the model. The model generates some text. Sequential Thinking will then break it down into like steps. And it basically just generates a better description for us. And so it's going through right now, I think I kind of show it, is it goes through and does sequential thinking on all of these. And it does it in batch, it does a bunch at a time. And then here you can see I'm creating a big update with the ID, the path, and the value. And there's my description for all of those. And in interest of time, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit. I'm basically going to do the same thing for tags. Right? I'm going to say, hey, go through all those features, generate a bunch of tags for me. And so here you can see it's generating all the tags for me. And I'm going to do an update in batch. And then to prove that this worked, hopefully it'll show it up here. So here it just gave me a summary that I didn't really ask for, but it did it anyway. Pulls all that information in. And I'm going to go over to the work item here. All right, so now here I go back to the backlog. I refresh the backlog. You can see now I have all these tags set on all my features. And I can open up, and here's a nice implementation, a description of every single feature that I have. And so I can go through all these. So this is a nice way to help you manage your backlog. You can do some really cool stuff. You can go out and find duplicates along your backlog and get rid of duplicates. Right? That's another nice one. Another one is I can open up a user story and say, hey, you know what? Generate a test case for all this. And it'll actually generate the test case for you, put all the steps in for those, and then link it back to the user story. So again, you can get very creative on some of the things that we do here. And we're hoping that this MCP server will open up a lot of cool scenarios for people to kind of start doing things on your own. Not only as an engineer just working in Visual Studio and opening up work items and looking at them and summarizing, that's all great, but doing some of the stuff that I just showed for like managing your entire backlog, right? Getting rid of the junk that you might not need out there and help you along the way. So anyway, MCP server.
Awesome
Expect
stuff.
to see it in.
Awesome stuff. Yeah.
We'll do a full announcement in like 2 weeks. So just keep an eye on the blog posts and stuff. We'll have something out there in a couple weeks. So we got a couple more minutes that I think Dave wants to finish.
Yep. So your call to action. You should move your code to GitHub to leverage the full capabilities of GitHub Copilot, GitHub Advanced Security, and everything. But we know you're probably going to have to take time to figure out the resources, who's going to do that, when can you work that into your schedules and all that. But start today. Use GitHub Copilot now in Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, your IDE of choice. Take advantage of that vision for Copilot and agent mode and things like that. And start looking at the GitHub Enterprise Importer and even do some trial runs perhaps to map out your migration strategy, whether that's to github.com or it's to GHE with data residency. Remember, we just launched that in the US as well. And then execute that migration to take advantage of the full capabilities of GitHub Copilot, such as the coding agent, supply chain security with Dependabot, secret protection, and code security. And by doing so, the developer productivity gains that you get in keeping and establishing a great security posture will make up for that time that you actually spent doing the migration, but you're still going to be able to leverage all those investments you've made over the years in Azure boards and Azure pipelines and all of that.
So
The last, oh,
That's good. You mind if I say something real quick?
yeah.
Okay. So one of the top questions that we got from people in the booth yesterday is, when can I get a coding agent that works in Azure DevOps so that when I open up a work item, it'll go out and do the same things as you can do with issues. We are hoping that the MCP server is going to help with all of that. Remember when I talked earlier about like, hey, GitHub is going to be well ahead of Azure DevOps in a lot of this innovation, and we're going to try to do our best to kind of keep up with it in the fact of integrations. That's one of the things that we're going to try to go solve. So keep an eye on us on the blog post is that. We're hoping we can solve that problem. I know that's super exciting stuff. It's super exciting for us as well. We're just not quite there yet, but it is something that we're going to be focused on and looking into. So just FYI.
Yep, and I had to skip over just a couple of slides there, but if you go download the deck, there's slides in there that point you to the documentation for the integration and a couple of other things as well. But Dan, thanks, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
That was fun.
Thank you.